Come closer. The shadows have missed you, and tonight they have a new story to tell. Welcome to Scary Stories After Dark. The rain came down in sheets, rattling against the rusted tin roof of the warehouse like skeletal fingers drumming for entry. Inside, the air was heavy with mildew and the sour-sweet tang of stale popcorn. Simi and Nellie sank into their seats, whispering jokes to each other to hide the unease prickling their skin. The chairs were oversized, padded like coffins lined in velvet. A faint motor whirred beneath them. When Nellie shifted, she swore something slithered against her ankle. All around them, the audience sat perfectly still. No popcorn rustling, no coughs, no shifting of jackets or clearing of throats, just silence, thick, unnatural, buzzing in their ears louder than the storm outside. Then, creak. Every chair groaned at once. Simi's eyes darted to the rows ahead. One by one, like dolls tugged on invisible strings, the heads of every audience member rotated, not their bodies, just their heads, spinning unnaturally slow until a sea of bulging, glassy eyes fixed on the two of them. Nellie clutched Simi's arm. Don't look back. Before Simi could breathe, the seatbelt snapped down across her chest and legs, metallic, cold, locking her in. Nellie screamed as hers did the same. The screen in front of them flickered, static bleeding across the surface like mold. The film began to roll, and the theater exhaled. 2 hours earlier, the sky had been the same color as wet cement, pressing down on their little town like a weight. Simi had been sprawled across her couch, scrolling listlessly when the ad appeared. A blood-red banner flashing across her feed. One night only, the immersive horror experience. Theater of Terror, a traveling pop-up event. Her thumb hovered. Exclusive horror movies you can't find anywhere else. The tagline pulsed almost alive. She screenshotted it and sent it to Nellie with a single caption, "Wanna get scared?" Nellie had replied almost instantly, "Better than rotting in this dead town. Let's go." By late afternoon, they stood in the drizzle, staring up at the warehouse. It loomed like a carcass, abandoned brick, boarded windows, chains rattling on the doors. The only sign of life was the flicker of a neon marquee. Theater of Terror, now showing. The workers at the entrance were dressed like old-time ushers, red coats with brass buttons, white gloves smudged gray. Their faces were too pale, their smiles too long. One leaned down to take their tickets, voice a rasp that sounded wet in the throat. "Welcome to the show." Inside, the warehouse was gutted. Massive curtains of faded velvet draped the walls, molding in spots. Exposed pipes hissed steam that rolled across the cracked concrete floor. The faint smell of mildew was masked by the sharp butter stench of popcorn. Simi shivered but forced a laugh. God, they really went all out. A cluster of ushers stood in the corner, whispering too fast, too quiet, like insects buzzing. None of them blinked. When the girls found their theater, the hallway seemed endless. Light bulbs overhead flickered in a rhythmic pulse, guiding them like a heartbeat toward the double doors. Inside, the auditorium yawned wide and shadowy, rows upon rows of velvet seats, a vast screen already glowing faintly with static. They slipped into the center row, sinking deep. The chairs purred faintly with hidden mechanisms, and Nellie leaned over, grinning nervously. "This is like Disney, but creepier," she whispered. From behind them, an usher hissed sharply, "Shh." They both whipped around. The usher pressed one gloved finger to his lips. Only it didn't stop there. The finger slid down into his throat, stretching the skin until the black pit of his mouth yawned impossibly wide. Then, just as quickly, he lowered his hand. His smile snapped back in place, and he vanished into the dark. The static on the screen fizzled into black. The auditorium plunged into silence so thick, Simi swore she could hear her own blood pumping. Then the seats hummed. It started as a vibration, playful almost, like one of those theme park rides Simi used to love, but it grew, deepening into a low mechanical purr that slithered into their bones. Something brushed across Simi's calf. She jerked, thinking it was Nellie. "Don't," Simi hissed. "I didn't move," Nellie whispered back. The brushing became skittering, tiny pricks racing up her shin, like dozens of legs. A faint pinch snapped against her ankle, sharp enough to sting. Simi yelped, kicking, but the seat clamped tighter. She glanced down. The leather pulsed where it touched her skin, as if something was crawling inside the chair itself. The audience around them shifted in unison. Every head turned slightly, every hand folded neatly in laps. Not a single sound, until all at once the clapping began. Slow, deliberate, snap, snap, snap. It didn't sound like applause. It sounded like bones breaking. The ushers appeared in the aisles, moving stiff as mannequins. Their grins had widened, stretching until their cheeks split faintly at the corners. One leaned over a woman in the front row, lifted her hand, and bent her finger backward until it cracked. She didn't scream. She clapped along, hollow eyes unblinking. Nellie pressed her head against Simi's shoulder, trembling. "Sim, this isn't a skit." The screen flared to life, searing white. For a second, Simi thought she saw her own face on it, pale and terrified. But then the image warped. Trees, moonlight, the sound of someone running, panting, crashing through the dark. A girl was being hunted, and she looked exactly like Simi. Simi blinked hard, shaking her head as the image on the screen stuttered. It was her, sprinting through black woods, branches snapping across her face. Every terrified breath echoed like it was being dragged straight out of her lungs. Nellie gripped the arms of her chair, shaking. "Sim, that's..." She didn't finish. The strap snapped open with a metallic clack. Simi leapt to her feet, dragging Nellie's arm. "Come on." They bolted for the glowing red exit sign at the back. The audience kept clapping, heads swiveling as they passed. Their eyes followed, rolling too far back in sockets, like loose marbles. The double doors burst open, spilling them into a narrow hall. The flickering bulbs overhead buzzed like flies. Another door waited at the end. They sprinted, shoved it open, and stumbled straight into another auditorium. The screen glowed white. Rows of silent people sat watching, the same mildew stench, the same velvet seats. "No," Nellie whispered. They slammed back into the hall, choosing the other door, only to burst into another theater, this one darker, colder. A figure stood at the front row, its head cocked all the way sideways, staring at them through the static flicker. Simi grabbed Nellie's hand tighter. "We'll find the way out. We will." But Nellie was already fading from her grip. When Simi looked down, her friend wasn't there. Just empty air and the press of shadows. The strap of the chair had closed over her again. Her wrists bled where she'd fought against it. She screamed Simmy's name, but her friend was gone, swallowed by the rose. On screen, the forest scene crackled sharper. Simmy was running barefoot, clothes torn, face pale in the moonlight. A sound came from the trees, something large, panting, wet, crashing closer. "No," Nellie sobbed. "No, this isn't real." But the audience was laughing now, loud, shrieking laughter, bodies bouncing in their seats, popcorn spilled from mouths lined with too many teeth. On screen, claws tore through the branches, Simmy tripped, fell, screamed, blood spattered across the camera lens. Nellie shrieked, fighting her restraints, as the audience around her roared with joy, cheering like they were at a comedy show. And when she blinked, the blood wasn't only on the screen anymore. It dripped from the ceiling, warm, sticky, coating her face. Simmy tore through the looping halls, every door slamming behind her, every new theater identical yet worse. Each time she entered, the faces in the audience looked less human. Two wide jaws, skin sagging like melted wax, eyes popping like swollen glass marbles. Her breath caught. She wasn't sure anymore if she was running toward Nellie or away from something following her. She shoved into another set of doors. This theater was almost empty, save for a handful of figures seated in the front row. Their heads ticked toward her in jerky movements. The screen flared to life. It wasn't a movie. It was Nellie, strapped, screaming, face smeared in blood that kept falling from somewhere above. Simmy staggered forward. "Nellie!" The audience in the front row erupted in applause, each clap a brittle snap, sharp enough to echo. And then the screen rippled. Not flicker, ripple, like the fabric of it wasn't projection at all, but water. A pale hand burst through, clawed and trembling. Another followed. A body dragged itself free, sliding onto the ceiling with impossible grace, its limbs bending backward, joints popping. It crawled above her, saliva stringing down onto her cheek. The laughter around her fractured, breaking into shrieks as more hands reached out from the screen. The audience didn't move, not in fear, but in delight. They leaned forward, mouths open, eager. The creatures emerged in packs, spindly figures with faces still fuzzed in static. They crawled across the ceiling like insects, upside down, heads swiveling as their jaws clicked. One dropped onto the floor in front of her chair, skittering close. Its static face leaned into hers until she could smell burned film. She thrashed. The usher appeared suddenly at her side. Same red coat, same white gloves. He smiled too wide. Then he placed a gloved hand on her chest. "Shh." The sound didn't come from his throat. It hissed from inside her ears. The creatures began to descend. Simmy slammed through another door, only to find herself face to face with Nellie at last. For a heartbeat, relief flooded her. Until she saw Nellie's eyes. Bulging, glassy, sharp teeth flashing as she smiled too wide. "Nellie," Simmy whispered. But Nellie's pupils stretched into black pools. She cocked her head, smile twisting. "What's wrong, Simmy? Why are you looking at me like that?" The laughter of the audience swelled again. And then Nellie lunged. Simmy slipped away by instinct, shoulder glancing the aisle seat, velvet ripping under her nails as she tore for the nearest door. The click of teeth followed, too many, too close. Then the bone snap applause rose like hail. The door gave. She stumbled into a corridor that shouldn't exist. It was longer than before, too long, its ceiling low enough to press down on her thoughts. Exit signs throbbed red at odd intervals, the letters swimming EXIT, then stuttering into EXIST, then back again. A projector beat somewhere beyond the walls, a mechanical heart with a cough. Simi ran. Doors lined the hall like open mouths. The first one opened on an auditorium washed in blue. The audience wore paper masks of her face, 20, 30, 100 Simi smiles, too flat, too wide, clapping in that brittle rhythm, snap, snap, snap. On the screen, a girl in a wet dress crashed through cattails near a black lake. She looked over her shoulder, and Simi looked back at herself. The camera was inside her throat. Every breath fogged the frame. "Simi," the whisper trembled from the speakers in her own voice, pitched lower. "Tell her you never wanted to come. Tell her you always make the choices." She slammed the door. Another auditorium. Yellow light this time, warm like afternoon. Wrong, wrong, wrong. Rows of ushers sat in the seats as if taking notes, gloved hands folded. One looked up and placed a finger to his lips. The finger slid in. The hand kept going. His smile tore like wet paper. Blackness winked inside him. He didn't blink. She ran again. A third door, dark as a lung. The screen pulsed. The sound here was only breath, someone else's, her own. It slipped behind her teeth and filled her mouth until she gagged on it. "Nellie," Simi croaked. "Nellie, where are you?" "Here," came an answer from the floorboards, from the seat backs, from the thin dust in the projector beam. Everywhere but where a person would be. Nellie crashed through a door and inherited a theater full of mannequins dressed in rain-spotted church clothes. Their plastic eyes were drilled holes, their mouths were drawn in O's, painted red. They leaned toward her in increments, click, click, heads ratcheting. On screen, a kitchen she recognized, Simi's, shuddered to life. Morning light slatted across a table ringed with coffee stains. A phone lay face down. Someone off camera whispered, "Don't turn it over." The camera didn't listen. The phone flipped. A photo of Nellie blinked up, one she'd never taken, her smile a fraction too sharp, a shadow at her shoulder that looked like a hand. "Sim," she whispered. "Simi, please." Laughter jangled from the back of the auditorium. She whipped around and found herself staring at herself. Another Nellie sat 3 rows up, chin in hand, gazing down with something that wasn't pity. The other Nellie's lips moved, no sound. Then she clapped once, slow. Snap. Nellie lurched for the aisle, and her strap locked without a seat to hold it, biting her wrist in midair. She wrenched free, skin tearing, and tumbled into the aisle. The mannequins straightened all at once. The projector hiccuped. The screen rippled like a pond surface pulled thin. A hand pushed through, then another. A torso wriggled free, edges humming with white noise. The thing stood on the back of a seat and turned its static blurred face toward her. The O of its mouth spread wider. Its teeth were film sprockets. "Shh," it breathed, and the hush crawled into her ear canals and lay down there, heavy. She bolted for the exit. They found each other by impact, corner, corner, bodies colliding with the panicked relief of falling through a net. Simi grabbed Nellie's shoulders. Nellie grabbed back. Their eyes were human, then wrong, then human again, as if a projector somewhere kept swapping reels every second. "Don't let go," Simi said. "Even if I look like, don't let go." "I won't," Nellie lied, or maybe promised. The next door poured them into a huge auditorium with ornate moldings and a ceiling fresco of people falling upward into clouds. The audience was sparse. Those who sat there clapped with their heads turned fully around, their jaws unhinged with each snap. The stage under the screen had a curtain. It bulged like something behind it was breathing. On screen, the woods again. Simi running, Nellie laughing in a row with the masked audience. Then the image cut, hard, to a different angle, one from above the girls where they stood, tiny and trembling in their row, hands white-knuckled. The camera watched them watch themselves. The theater became a throat. "Stop it," Nellie hissed at the empty projectionist booth. "We're not. Stop it." "You shouldn't have come," the speakers whispered in Simi's timbre. "You always knew this is what you wanted." The seat under Simi shuddered, even though she wasn't sitting. Something inside it pushed against the leather like a knee from inside a womb. A second later, an arm pressed out, elbow first, writhing for daylight. The aisle seats around them did the same, bodies being born from cushions, tan foam wet and pink. A copy of Simi sat up in the nearest seat. It was perfect until it blinked. The blink clicked. It turned its head all the way around without moving its body and began to clap. Snap. Nellie's grip loosened, just a fraction. Simi felt it like betrayal, like gravity slipping. "Don't," she said. The usher in the aisle appeared between one clap and the next, a cut in reality, red coat, smoking at the seams. He held out a paper tub of popcorn. Something inside moved like mice. "Concessions," he rasped, but the word came from the tub. Butter leaked down the sides in a thread the color of old teeth. "Get away," Nellie said, voice shredded. "Get away from us." He tipped the tub. Kernels spilled, skittering across the carpet on tiny legs before burrowing in. Where they vanished, the floor rose, bubbled, breathing. "Don't look down," Simi said. "Don't." The carpet under Nellie's sneaker flexed with a pulse. A mouth opened there made of woven fibers and dust, and spoke with her grandmother's voice. "Tell her the secret or we'll keep you." Nellie's throat locked. She hadn't told anyone that secret. Not Simi, not anyone. How the theater could know it made the ground tilt. The laughter swelled. The audience leaned forward, hungry for disclosure, for the tear. Their faces were wrong in the way a mirror becomes wrong when you stare too long. They were almost. "Simi," Nellie whispered, not looking. I didn't want to stay in this town. I was leaving. I was going to tell you after the movie." Simi's face shivered. For a moment, the eyes weren't hers. Then they were. Hurt flared and then drowned under terror. "You're telling me now," she said. "And we're leaving together." Nellie nodded, relieved and ashamed and shaking. The usher was gone. The popcorn tub lay overturned, its contents twitching slowly until they stilled like dead beetles. They ran, door, hall, door. The labyrinth complied and warped and kept its joke. A theater of mirrors. The screen was glass, and dozens of theaters receded inside it, each a box inside a box. In every box, Simi and Nellie ran. In some, they were already dead. In some, they were the ones clapping. In a few, they held hands and made it to a rectangle of light at the back. Hope scalded. Simi pressed her palm to the glass. Cold met her, then warm skin. The reflection pressed back with a different pulse. "Don't," Nellie said quietly. "It's not us." A theater of water, shallow, inch deep, a concrete floor flooded with projector light swimming across the ripples. They splashed through, feet sliding, and beneath the water, hundreds of ticket stubs shifted like fish. When Simi looked down, Every stub had her name printed on it, different fonts, different years. "Nellie," she said, voice threadbare, "how long do you think this has been here?" "Longer than the town." They slipped again, caught each other, did not let go. The next door opened onto a small room the size of a maintenance closet. No seats, no screen, just a single chair facing a wall painted with chalk tally marks. An overhead bulb buzzed itself toward death. On the wall, the tallies were divided into twos, pairs. Every 10th was smudged out with a handprint. Simi reached for the knob to leave, and her fingers closed on another hand already there, cold as a drain. She wrenched away with a choked sound, and the light died. The clap picked up on the other side of the door, faster. Snap, 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 snap. A metronome driving them back into the current. They burst through into the largest auditorium yet. A balcony loomed, a chandelier from some other life hung black with dust. The curtain on the stage bulged again, more insistent, a shape pacing behind it. The projector's beam cut the dust like a blade. On screen, a live feed, no delay, no grain, showed the back of the curtain lit from inside. Something turned its head slowly, as if hearing them breathe. "Don't let it see you see it," Simi said, though she didn't know why. They crab-walked sideways along the row, hands skimming seat backs that were warm as bodies. The copies of them in the near aisle turned in their seats to track them, smiles pinned. The chandelier clicked as if full of teeth. At the far exit, a seam in the darkness glowed pale, not the red throb of exit. This light was softer, daylight, rainlight. It fell into the room as a silver sheet spilling over the carpet, and it made the hair rise along Simi's arms with wanting. The air smelled different there, wet asphalt, petrichor, the world. Nellie squeezed her hand hard enough to hurt. Together. They moved for it. The audience rose as one, finally breaking their silent reverence. Limbs unfolding like ladders, bodies oddly tall. The applause accelerated into a brittle storm. Snap, 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 snap. The curtain shuddered with a growl that wasn't a sound, but a pressure in the teeth. It gathered itself to leap. "Now," Simi breathed. They ran, shoulders slamming doors, feet pounding breath into the floor, and dove through the seam of silver. Into rain so cold it felt like birth. They skidded on slick concrete, laughing and sobbing and shaking, and the warehouse rose behind them, old and ugly and suddenly small. Cars hissed by out on the street. A neon sign buzzed to itself like nothing had ever been wrong. Simi gulped at the sky. Nellie threw her head back. "Sim," Nellie said, voice a wet laugh. The raindrops hung in the air, trembling. Then, delicately, like reprised applause, they began to rise. Nellie's mouth closed, their laughter died. The neon marquee across the lot hummed louder, letters flickering, swelling until they ate the dark. Theater of Terror, now showing. Behind them, through the doors they had just escaped, the sound of clapping floated out, crisp as bone. Snap, snap, snap. The rain rose in silver threads, sliding up their arms, their faces into the sky, where storm clouds reeled the drops back like film on a spool. Simi staggered backward, dragging Nellie with her. No, we're out. But the street was too still, cars frozen at the curb. A woman with an umbrella stood across the lot, unmoving, her face tilted up to the sky, her neck bent further, until her head lolled upside down, grin stretching wide. Nellie whimpered. It followed us. The warehouse doors behind them creaked open. dim golden light spilled across the wet asphalt. Inside, the muffled roar of applause thundered like a storm. "Don't look back," Simi whispered, but Nellie already had. Her eyes caught the light, hungry, hollow. "Sim," she breathed, and her smile split sharp. "They're waiting." Simi stumbled away, boots slapping puddles, heart lurching. The world peeled around her, streetlights flickering, sky juddering like a skipped reel. The marquee above the warehouse glowed brighter, letters buzzing. "Theater of Terror, Admit 2." Her vision tunneled. She blinked. She was seated again. Velvet pressed her arms, straps hugged her legs, the chair hummed, purring. To her right, Nellie sat strapped in, eyes wide, breathing too fast. For a moment, her face was human again, frightened, real. "Simi?" she whispered. Is this still happening?" The screen bloomed white. On it, two women shuffled down a rainy street. They turned. They looked up at a marquee. They tried to run. The audience roared with laughter. Simi's scream joined Nellie's, but the sound was drowned in clapping. Snap, snap, snap. The projector whirred, hungry. The film burned on.